I was her, the mother to the saviour of the human race. Actually, she's the leader of the human race. I wasn't going to tell you now, but considering you think she's going to give birth to the saviour of the human race, I thought I would quickly amend the facts. Oh, in that case, she's not me. Then she's John. John, my son, was the saviour of the human race under the sky. Would have been if we had not stopped Judgment Day. You're welcome, by the way. So, with this new Judgment Day, and after that, she's the leader. She's John. Nothing fucking changes, does it? Well, by the sounds of it, no. It doesn't. Gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Terminator Dark Fate. Okay, this is the 6th Terminator film. I've reviewed the other 5. Reviewed Genesis on this channel because it was a 2015 review, and I've reviewed the other 4 before that on the Retro channel, so do check them out. Terminator 1 was the first film review. I think it was the first review, full stop, that went up. So check those out. And I also did a ranking on the channel back in November 2019. So I'll redo the ranking, possibly on this channel, to include Dark Fate. But to recap quickly what I thought of each of the first 5 films. Terminator 1, great low budgets, well, I say low to medium budget sci-fi film. A couple of clunky visual effects, even by 1980 standards, but overall a really great film. Terminator 2 Judgment Day is a masterpiece in cinema, with some stunning visual effects that, along with Jurassic Park, paved the way for fantastic CGI. That, along with Jurassic Park, were a massive step forward in terms of CGI and visual effects. Something that we may consider something we may overuse nowadays, but back in 1991 and 1993 for Jurassic Park's case, they were definitely innovators of that technology. Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, the first one without James Cameron involvement, as he somehow lost the rights between the films. And thankfully he regained them between Genesis and Dark Fate, and that's why he's back involved in Dark Fate. But Rise of the Machines, did really like it when I first saw it, wasn't really a fan on rewatch. Bit of a clunky made film, not completely terrible, but not really up to the standard of the first 2, and the lack of Cameron's involvement, well, no Cameron involvement, obviously shows. Terminator Salvation is possibly my Terminator Salvation, the 4th film, is possibly my favourite of the 3 post-Judgment Day, pre-Dark Fate films. Some very strange choices in where to go with the story. However, I do like how they were trying to do the future set story. So at least they were trying to do something a bit different to what came before. Terminator Genesis completely fucked up the entire series by attempting to softly reboot the series, just like in Star Trek, just like in the 2009 Star Trek. However, it did a lot of things wrong, and it also tried to set up a new trilogy that with a mystery box akin to the Amazing Spider-Man films, and it was more focused on setting up this mystery box and remaking scenes from the first film, as opposed to actually telling a good story. And the story that they tried to tell wasn't very good, and it just fell so flat on the head. And it fell so flat on its head, plus its major twist about halfway through the film was spoilt in the trailer. At least Terminator Salvation's at least the twist at least the twist halfway through Terminator Salvation wasn't spoiled in the trailers. So Genesis is easily, in my opinion, the worst film in the Terminator series. Some people might choose Rise of the Machines, some people might choose Salvation, but for me, it's easily Genesis. It was the first of the films I saw at the cinema, followed by this one, and it was the only one I didn't have any reaction to when coming out. I felt absolutely nothing when leaving the cinema. I didn't even realize that until I was almost home. And then over time, I'm now hating it. I now really, really hate that film. Really hate that plot. And the new cast, besides J.K. Simmons in a minor role, aren't very good. At least Schwarzenegger at least puts in a good performance. Genesis was supposed to be a soft reboot of the timeline and the series. The first 4 films sort of make their own timeline in a way. Genesis tries to softly reboot it by being in the same timeline, but then they change stuff, such as the first film events in the first film not really being a bit different. Such as events in the first film being a bit different. Now we get to Terminator Dark Fate, which is the 6th film, and that ignores the timeline set by Rise of the Machines and Salvation, and it ignores the timeline set by Genesis. This film, it does do something like Genesis, where it does sort of set up maybe a trilogy, was setting up a trilogy or a ongoing story of further films. I thought it was going to be the last one, but I think it's setting up some more films where they've got a new battle to take on. The difference between this one and Genesis is that Dark Fate, if it doesn't succeed in setting up its trilogy, it will definitely be... then it will work as a standalone film on its own, a bit like how Salvation did, in a way, although better than Salvation, obviously, and also bring an end to the original series. So before we carry on, massive spoiler alert. Okay, here we go. The film opened in 1998 after a recap of a scene from Terminator 2, and we see that one of the T-800s has managed to locate John and Sarah following Judgment Day the year before, what would have been Judgment Day, as they managed to avert it in T2. However, Skynet has sent back a couple more Terminators to assassinate John, and one of them manages to succeed. After that, Sarah goes Terminator hunting and killing. She never really finds the one that killed her son until 22 years later, but more on that later. But she'll get mysterious texts from an unknown source telling her where to go and at what time to kill Terminators. Meanwhile, Skynet has been stopped and Judgment Day averted, see Terminator 2. However, after 2020, a new computer system, they don't give a specific time when it happens, but a new computer system named Legion, which is a computer weapon program as opposed to Skynet, which was a computer defense program. But the weapons program, the Legion, basically does exactly the same thing as what Skynet did. It's the new Skynet, and it pretty much launches the planet into nuclear war, at the end of which humans are pretty much eradicated apart from a few survivors, and robots and machines are created to hunt down and assassinate the rest. And a small band of survivors form a resistance against them. So by 2042, we get the full-on human military resistance against the machines. However, the machines are very powerful, possibly even more powerful than the Skynet ones. And one of them is sent back in time to assassinate the future leader of the human resistance. They think that she's going to be the mother of the future leader of the human resistance, but it actually turns out that she will be the future leader of the human resistance, Danny, a Mexican girl of late teens, early 20s, living in Mexico City, and a machine goes back to assassinate her. However, the humans, aware of this, send a enhanced human, a human with machine parts inside of her, a bit like in Salvation, but not quite. A bit like what they did in Salvation, except this time she's got a bit more of her human body with her, with the the machine parts. well, Salvation, it was a bit more machine, despite the guy thinking he was human. Plus, Grace, the character who gets sent back in time, the enhanced human, knows about her parts, whilst the guy from Salvation didn't until they found out. So she goes back. So she's sent back in time to fix. So she's sent back in time to protect Danny. I also have to quickly mention that I kind of get. I also have to quickly mention that I'm not really a big fan of the scene where she ends up in 2020, as this is where the film takes place in 2020. For some reason in this film, the time travel bubbles, they're kind of in the middle of the air, which means that with Grace's case, it's kind of in the middle of the bridge, and she falls off the bridge. In the Terminator's case, it's in the middle of the air, and he falls down to the ground in the middle of a tower block. Also, the machines were a bit more precise when trying to get him to Danny's home. It's just a shame she wasn't there for them. It's just bad luck for them that she wasn't there at the time. They just missed her. Anyway, and the first bit also has some dickish Mexican police. Just, I don't know, what were they responding to? Were they responding to an incident on the bridge? And why are they arresting the two Mexican people that were helping Grace? It's just a bit weird, and by the looks of it, Grace just, when she sees weapons, she automatically just attacks people. I suppose she regains herself afterwards and just doesn't go after anybody with a gun afterwards. But yeah, that opening bit, I'm not really a big fan of it. I wasn't really a big fan of the police chasing Kyle Reese in the first film and in the fifth film, where it turned out one of the cops was the T-1000 for some reason. But after that, the movie gets really great with Grace trying to protect Danny and her brother from the Terminator. Sadly, Danny's brother does get killed in the chase, the truck chase afterwards. However, then Sarah Connor turns up and deals with the Terminator, although it survives. Grace and Danny then try and get some medical supplies for Grace, as there's some problems, medical problems with Grace, and then Sarah meets up with them again, and together the three of them together Sarah and Grace have to protect Danny, get her across the border to meet with the contact Grace was sent to meet if they needed help, which was the guy sending Sarah the texts where to go to defeat Terminators. However, the Terminator, I think it's the Rev 9. Obviously, Legion's models of Terminator now are instead of T, like the Skynet ones. But the Rev 9 has them arrested at the border because they crossed the border illegally with a friend of Danny's uncle. And they go to the detention center. So I guess basically the police station scene from the first film and the fifth film. Because the fifth film, not repeating the first film scene, but kind of taking beats from it. And I suppose this one does as well. They have at the immigration detention center, Sarah Connor's already in trouble with the law. She's wanted in pretty much every state in the US, so they've come to collect her. Meanwhile, people are trying to examine Grace, and the Rev 9 pretty much infiltrates the place and tries to kill people. He manages to kill the friend he manages to kill Danny's uncle's friend. Sadly, he and the brother could actually have helped a bit more in the film before having more glorious deaths, but I guess they didn't want to have those extra characters. To be honest, having too many characters would be a bit of a stretch. And it is good that they are focusing on the three main characters. It's just a shame that they got less remarkable deaths for their situations, but the heroes managed to escape, and they get to the place they need to go, which turns out to be the home of Carl, and Carl turns out to be the Terminator who assassinated John, much to Sarah's disgust. Of course, she's going to kill him afterwards, after they finished protecting Danny and defeated the Rev 9. So they go to meet this guy who has a potential way to defeat the Rev 9, and with his military people's help, they're able to fight off the Rev 9. And then in the air, there's a bit of a fight in the air, but there is sort of this climax feel with the aeroplane scene, but it does It isn't, but it's not the climax, and it does go on quite a bit of time. To be honest, this film feels like it's got 3 climaxes. The first one's in the air, then we've got the one in the water, and then it's finally inside the dam. And even then, the dam one goes on long. I know this machine is really powerful and hard to kill, but it seems to be incredibly difficult to kill this one. Then again, Arnie seems to be incredibly difficult to kill in this film as well. I also like, this is back earlier on at the start, I like early on how crushing the machine with a presser, like in the first film, doesn't work with this new machine. It worked with Arnie's first Terminator, but it doesn't work here. Anyway, so a couple of fights, and they end up in the dam, and then they end up inside the dam, and Grace and Arnie's Terminator have to sacrifice themselves to terminate the Rev 9. There are some bits where we think they're dead, and then they turn out to be alive, as the same with the Rev 9, and then they die again. And then Sarah and Danny Sarah and Danny leave, basically. I don't know whether they are able to destroy the skeletons, or if they just leave them there, like in T1. T1, in a deleted scene, there were people from Skynet that found the arm and the chip that would be used to help create Skynet, see Terminator 2. But they don't destroy the skeletons here, the machines here. They don't destroy their skeletons or the Grace's body. So maybe someone's going to find, maybe it's going to be a T1, T2 situation where they're going to find these skeletons and they're going to develop Legion from them, perhaps. And then at the end, Sarah and Danny oversee a young Grace in the playground before moving on to, I guess, their future together, I guess. I wonder if they're still allowed in the US, because Danny's an illegal immigrant and Sarah's still a wanted woman in every state, unless she's been given immunity by the army. Or maybe they'll head back to Mexico or travel the world. In fact, a world globe-trotting film would be pretty cool. And I think Salvation did a little bit of that, as does this film. But a world globe-trotting film could be interesting. Dark Fate. I think this one is pretty well handled on a story and execution level. I think there is a bit too much CG, and I think that is a problem with the last couple of films as well. But I think it's a bit more effective here, especially with the Terminators themselves, and the laser effects at the start have never looked better. Some story nitpicks can be a bit complicated, and the climax kind of goes on forever. And in fact, like I said, there seems to be like about three climaxes, and it just keeps going on. Just kill that fucking clown, robot. But I do think this is the strongest of the stories since T2, and I think it's and I think the execution is done really well by direct. And I do think it's executed really well. Arnold Schwarzenegger does another great performance as Carl / the Terminator, and Linda Hamilton is back in full force as Sarah Connor. But it's basically Hamilton's film. And similarly, Mackenzie Davis, and I can't remember the actress playing Danny, but Mackenzie Davis does a great job, and so does the actress playing Danny, and I like these two characters. I think they're great. And if there's further films with Danny, then I look forward to seeing her in the future, and I like how the character was developed throughout the film. Also liked her brother in the brief time of his appearance, and I think he and the friend of her uncle's could have gotten a bit more to do and could have gotten more satisfactory deaths. With the brother, he gets a rod through his back, and then he gets hit by the Rev 9 in an explosion. I think he could have at least sacrificed himself. At the very least, he could have at least maybe tried to drive the car into the machine, into the truck by the. Controlled by the Rev 9, to at least try and sacrifice himself to try and save his sister, at least. But besides that, but the acting do some really great jobs, and it's a really good story. Not completely perfect, and there's some, like I said, it is a bit over reliant on CG, especially in the climaxes, especially on the plane stuff. But on the whole, it's really well done. But on the whole, it's a great film, and Tim Miller did a brilliant job in directing the film, and it's great to have Cameron's influence back in the series. It's also quite interesting to go down this new timeline with the assassination of John Connor following what would have been Judgment Day, and a new Skynet-esque computer system pretty much trying to do what Skynet was shut down. Pretty much trying to do what Skynet did before it was shut down. And I'm not sure when the Legion Judgment Day will be. They didn't really say. We just know that Grace came from 2042, but we can presume that maybe in the 2020s or 2030s it happened. Possibly 2029 when the original first two films had their future scenes set. So on the whole, Terminator Dark Fate, I think this is definitely the best film since T2. However, whether it's better than the first two, I was debating whether it was with myself whether it was better than the first one. But I think the first film, despite its simple story and some effects not quite working, I think it does pretty much sucks. But I do think it very much succeeds in telling its story, and it doesn't let its low budget get it down. Apart from a few practical effects that don't quite work. So I think the first one is slightly better than this one. T2 is still the best, though. Hi everyone, Nick from the future, actually coming to change my score for the review. I originally gave it a 9 out of 10, however, after thinking about it a little bit more, actually I don't think this film's quite as great as I thought it was. So instead I will be giving Terminator Dark Fate a 8 out of 10. I still think it's a good film, but there is some issues that I have, and I've noticed a few other issues after thinking about it. Sarah's character, for example, is very different to what it was in the first two movies, and I don't mean because of the trauma from the death of John, but seriously different. As well as a couple of problems I already had, such as the climax going on way too long, and the plane stuff just being very CG'd. It's just a little bit of a mess at the very end, just a little bit. But it's still a really good film, still better than the previous three, but not as good as the original two. Okay, back to past me with the rest of this review. Yeah, just a few niggles, sometimes plot, sometimes execution, but for the most part, it's definitely well handled, it's definitely well made, and brilliant job by Tim Miller and the crew, and definitely a great story, and great to have James Cameron back with these story ideas. And after this film, I'd be happy to see, well, I think they're hoping for a trilogy. I'd be happy to see 2 more installments following the new storyline. But like I said, unlike Genesis, this film could easily work as a standalone film if it doesn't get to follow itself up. And also at the same time, if it is the end, and at the same time if it doesn't get follow-ups, then it's a good end to the storyline starting from the first film and then moving into the second film, ignoring the others, and then coming to an end here. So, yeah, I think that it achieves that. But like I said, I'd be happy to see any follow-ups, and perhaps those, if they are doing 2 more, then they can wrap up the story pretty nicely. Hopefully. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching this review of Terminator Dark Fate. I'm hoping to see Shaun the Sheep Farmageddon soon. No confirmation, no. I'm also hoping to see Dr. Sleep, but I'm not sure if I will, and if I do, when. If Shaun the Sheep Farmageddon isn't the next review on this channel, then it will be X-Men Days of Future Past, because I'll be reviewing that on this channel, because I saw it in 2014 at the cinema, and I'm doing cinema films before 2015 as well on here. If Farmageddon is next, then Days of Future Past should follow that. And there should be an updated Terminator ranking coming later in the month, hopefully. I'll get around to that later in the month. That's it from me. Thank you for watching. Please check out my reviews of Genesis on this channel, and my reviews of the first 4 films on the Retro channel, as well as the original ranking. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne YouTube channel. You prick. And the new cast, besides Schwarzenegger and J.K. Simmons, the new cast isn't really that good. And the new cast isn't really great. And now we come to Terminator Dark Fate, which Genesis was trying to reboot the series, that changed the timeline that 3 and 4 existed in, and was pretty much changed the timeline 1 and 2, meaning that everything after the first film, meaning that everything in the timeline of the first 4 films was changed with, meaning that the original timeline with the first 4 films was changed. That's better. Hang on, cut all this bit. After the events of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, John Connor is surprisingly killed by a Terminator that looks like a T-8. John Connor is... Meanwhile, now that Judgment Day has been stopped, Skynet... Meanwhile, now that Judgment Day has been averted and Skynet has not been... Now I'm starting again. Meanwhile, where at the end of which lots of humans... if we could just lose that... Rev is a different model of Terminator to... Obviously, Legion's codes of that was going to be used and see in Terminator. But I do think it's a really good, and it's a bit of a. But I do think the story. Fucking bastard. But I do think they just kill that bloody robot. Just kill that fucking robot. It's basically her show, well, her film, basically. As soon as she turns up, it's her film again. She's probably sharing it with the other 2 female leads and later with Arnie, but it's more or less her film. But along with that, it's basically her film with Danny as well. And a new system trying to take, and a new Skynet system like So on the whole, I will be giving Terminator Dark Fate a 9 out of 10. And I wouldn't mind, and actually after this film, I would actually hopefully also see Doctor Sleep. But again, I haven't even less clue about whether I'll see that one or not, or when. I'm also hoping to see Doctor Sleep, but I'm not sure if I... Oh, so she... Nothing bloody... Hi everyone, Nick here from the future, just popping in to actually give a different... God's sake. Some of the characters aren't that well developed. As well as a couple of my own nitpicks I did see at the... as well as a couple of problems that I did have before thinking about doing a bit more thinking about it, like the plain stuff and stop burping. But not too much. But it's still a good film, and still certainly the third best, but not as good as the next two. Back to me with the... Okay, it's back to me with the rest